Welcome, everybody, to a post-game edition of All In with Art Stapleton, a New York Giants podcast brought to you by NorthJersey.com and The Record. I'm your host, Art Stapleton, and it is the morning after. It was a late night at MetLife Stadium, I'm sure, for a lot of you in the stands. By the time we got home, we wanted to regroup and reset, similar to what the Giants are going to do heading into this week off. Well, mini bye, I guess. Final score: the Dallas Cowboys 20, the New York Giants 15. The Giants are now 1-3. I have my thoughts on where this game went wrong, some of the feelings coming out of it. I'm sure a lot of you are licking your wounds this morning. Maybe you went in there confident. Some of you went in there expecting a blowout, and you didn't get that. But the results are the results. And as Dexter Lawrence said after the game, I'm not here for any petty wins. Now, I thought he meant pity, but on double check, he said petty. Petty wins. The idea that, moral victories is essentially how I took it. And the Giants were not looking for moral victories. So in that sense, I think it was a good message in the locker room after the game. But let's get into it. Let's talk about why they lost. We'll talk about the fourth and goal and why Brian Daboll did not go for it and took the points, and how ultimately that kind of framed a game yet again of the second guessing of the coach and the play caller. Let's get this out of the way. The last 2 weeks, I thought Brian Daboll as a play caller got the best of a veteran defensive coordinator in Jim Schwartz in Cleveland, and they win the game. And then I really thought they got the best get the best of Mike Zimmer, who is the longtime Vikings coach. He's the defensive coordinator now in Dallas. I thought schematically the Giants did everything that they wanted to do in the passing game. I thought, the Cowboys, just from a game plan perspective, the idea that they did not have Trayvon Diggs following Malik Neighbors for the entire game, and they allow the Giants to kind of dictate where Neighbors would be in the formation. A lot of times the motioning from the right side to the left side, and Diggs did not follow him. Some of the quick orbit motions, pre-snap, really seemed to cause the Cowboys problems. We saw that early on. The big play to Malik Neighbors that they ended up hitting was really a schematic thing. Yes, Neighbors' talent, he shook the defender like it was crazy. Andrew Booth could not hang with him, and he made that big play. But the reality is that Daboll really had it going offensively when they were hitting some plays. The idea that they were able to free up Neighbors. I mean, you're talking about 15 targets again from Malik Neighbors, 12 catches, 115 yards. We all want to talk about at the end of the game, Neighbors on fourth down. Another really good play by Daniel Jones, getting out of the pocket, navigating through traffic, making a very strong throw to the sideline. Neighbors again getting his feet in. This level of difficulty was much higher than the play at the end of the Washington game, and Neighbors can't hold on, and then he ends up hitting his head on the sideline, gets a concussion, out for the remainder of the game. Now, after the game, I'm sure if you haven't seen that video, Brian Burns doing his interview. Now, when players are in concussion protocol, they cannot speak with the media, so as much as we saw Malik Neighbors in the locker room, in and out, the only time we got a feel for where Neighbors is was the idea that Burns yelled across to Neighbors, "Hey, Malik, how you feeling?" And he said, "Nah," that kind of thing. But then Neighbors came across on his own Instagram page and talked about he's good, thanks for the prayers, and we'll see what happens. I mean, so concussion protocol is unpredictable. You have to see how he comes through it. The Giants now have 10 days before they play again in Seattle on October 6th. They play on a Sunday late in Seattle. So if Neighbors starts feeling good and progressing next week, it is a long trip to Seattle. So if there are any symptoms next week, he's not going to get cleared to play. But between now and then, there is a pretty big window to see if Neighbors can get cleared and get back on the field and be ready to go against the Seahawks. Again, 2 games in 5 days. It's a lot for these Giants. But this was a game you had to win. And you're now at 1-3. And I think that was the mood in the locker room. So I think the biggest thing overall right now for this Giants team was it's going to keep coming back to Brian Daboll. And I think it's a misnomer to go back to 2022 and say that Brian Daboll was this aggressive coach that all of a sudden was going for it on fourth down. It was the Dan Campbell syndrome in Detroit where everything was going to be roll the dice. Brandon Staley, when he was the head coach with the Chargers, this idea, the Ron Rivera, Riverboat Ron days in Carolina. That's really not who Brian Daboll was. He made the call to go for 2 in Tennessee in his first game. That's kind of framed his tenure. But the reality is that it hasn't been an extreme. It hasn't been him at the top of he's going to go for everything and be super aggressive. And then at the bottom, he's going to be, super conservative. He tries to play each week the way it was. Now, I thought this was an interesting point. The idea that 2 weeks ago, and how funny it is, 2 weeks ago in Washington with no kicker, we all know what happened. Graham Gano comes in with the groin injury, pulls his hamstring on the opening kickoff, chasing down Austin Eckler on a play that ends up getting called back because of a penalty anyway. The Giants have to play the game with no kicker. And there was this feeling that, well, if they only had a kicker, they would have won the game. And I've told people, and I wrote this, that's not 100% accurate because it changes the game, the way you play. And let's not forget, the end of the first half, when Malik Neighbors scores his first touchdown against the Commanders, it was on a fourth down play. Had Graham Gano not gotten injured, the Giants likely would have kicked the field goal and taken the points at the end of that first half in Washington. Now, fast forward to last night, and the Giants had a kicker, and Greg Joseph, as much as, there was frustration and maybe a little uncertainty because of the way Daboll handled the question in the press conference about Joseph and whether or not he'd be the kicker, they had a kicker, and they thought this was going to be a close game, and they started kicking field goals last night, and when he's making them, it kind of frames the way you're going to call plays and decisions that you're going to make. And I did think that because they had Greg Joseph, they were a little conservative and they felt the need to get points and they didn't want to give up no points. And that's a fine line for coaches in this league. And you can make mistakes and you can make the wrong decision. And if they don't turn out, people are going to frame you one way or the other. Say you're super aggressive or you're super conservative. And I don't think that's the case either way. I think that's a big misnomer in the league because I do think that I don't know necessarily if Brian Daboll is an aggressive coach. I think he has been aggressive at times. I think he's been conservative at times. And the right coach finds that right balance. And if decisions don't work out, I think then that becomes an issue. You have to know your team. And we used to say this about Tom Coughlin a lot. Tom Coughlin pushed the right buttons. He knew his team. But at the end of his tenure, he also knew his team, and he knew his defense was terrible in 2015. So if he didn't make plays for his offense, his defense was just going to give up the ball going back the other direction and give up points. The reason I talk about all this is when the Giants faced the 4th and goal and they took the field goal, at that point, I would have gone for it. I think that was the one spot in this game where you got to go and get in the end zone and get a touchdown. You see how the game's playing out. You can't trade field goal for Dallas touchdowns. Now, look at the difference between the Cowboys and the Giants. The Cowboys hit a big play to CeeDee Lamb, 55-yard touchdown. And I know everybody wants to talk about Tay Banks. Look, Tay Banks is going up against the best receivers in the league. He's still learning. He's 4 games into his second year. He's not a lockdown corner right now. And he's given up plays. I think he has good coverage. I just don't know if he's gotten to the point where he's making plays on the ball. And I think that's kind of what's showing up here. But that was a play where you had Tyler Nubin over the top. And when Banks gives up that catch and CeeDee Lamb makes that catch, you have to, if you're Tyler Nubin, take the proper angle. And he came hard to the sideline because I think he kind of got caught thinking that CeeDee Lamb was just going to take it straight up the sideline into the end zone. So Nubin comes hard on that angle, thinking that he's going to have to speed up and accelerate and knock him out of bounds. And what happened is CeeDee Lamb is good enough. He's top 10 receiver in the league, CeeDee Lamb. That's conservative. The idea that he's top 10. I mean, CeeDee Lamb is very, very good. And I think he kind of read Nubin a little bit, and he took it inside, and that all of a sudden, out-angled Tyler Nubin. And Lamb just kind of waltzed into the end zone. He flips the ball back, gets the penalty flag because he was throwing the ball at Tay Banks. And, that's a big touchdown in that situation. The Cowboys had 2 touchdowns. The screen to Rico Dowdell. I don't know what those 2 flags are for. We asked Brian Dable after the game. They picked the 2 flags up. Whether it was a legal man downfield, whether it was a hold, didn't seem to have much of a clarification as to what the officials saw. But when you throw 2 flags and they both get picked up, then you compound that with the face mask penalty that was called on Daniel Bellinger, which it was overshown the linebacker for the Cowboys who had the fistful of face mask of Daniel Bellinger on the play downfield. That's a huge turning point. The Giants don't have a huge margin of error. And when you make that call as officials, now look, this game was not won and lost because of the officials last night, but those are just 2 situations where you take the momentum away from the Giants on their opening drive with the face mask penalty on Bellinger, and then you swing it and you pick up those 2 flags on the first touchdown for the Cowboys. Those things they change the game, and the Giants have to overcome that, but it's hard to do. So that's where I kind of fall. Do I think Brian Dable could have been more aggressive last night? Yes. But then that brings us to the quarterback. And, Dable went out of his way to praise Daniel Jones again last night. 3 games in a row in which Jones has made the plays that Dable has asked him to make. But I think, again, we saw last night as to why the Giants believe, and they believed in the offseason, that they needed to make a concerted effort to get better at quarterback. Because there's a group of quarterbacks in this league every year, like a Dak Prescott did last night. And you could say what you want about Dak Prescott. When he had an opportunity to beat the Giants last night deep and take advantage of a mistake and put pressure on them, he did it. That pass to CeeDee Lamb, case in point. When Daniel Jones had the opportunity to go deep last night, when the Cowboys jumped and they had a free play and he had Darius Slayton open deep, Daniel Jones underthrew it. And this is a part of Jones's game that in today's NFL, you need to be able to throw the deep ball. You can't dink and dunk the entire time. And that's a problem. And so as good and as positive as some of the plays that Daniel Jones is making, and I said this last week and I mean it, Every week is not a referendum on Daniel Jones as the quarterback of the Giants. He is the quarterback of the Giants right now, but they seriously need an option at quarterback to take advantage of some of these plays, especially with the way you're building this offense, especially with the way the game has changed. You need to be able to cash in on those plays because they're only going to present themselves 2-3 times a game. And Daniel Jones missed on all of them yesterday. Now, is it all Daniel Jones's fault? No. Sometimes you have leaky protection, which you didn't have much last night. When's the last time the Giants could say they stood toe-to-toe with the Cowboys on both sides of the ball up front? Because they did last night. They did. Did they get the production that maybe you would have seen that you saw in Cleveland from the defensive line? No. But you got to give Dak Prescott some of that credit. As much as the Giants were all over Deshaun Watson, Dak Prescott is a much better quarterback. And you can say all you want about how Dak plays in the postseason and what he's doing. Dak Prescott is a much better quarterback than Deshaun Watson. So there were plays last night that the Giants came close and Prescott got rid of the ball. And Deshaun Watson held on to the ball, and that's why they end up with 8 sacks. So the production may not have been there, but the performance and the effort may have been there. And I think that was the case last night. The offensive line gave up 1 sack across the board. Micah Parsons was essentially a non-factor. Still, it doesn't mean that he didn't have a good game, Micah Parsons. It just meant the Giants did a very good job at neutralizing him. And then by the end of the game, when DeMarcus Lawrence is out and Micah Parsons is out, the Giants have an opportunity there, and they haven't been able to take after it. So I look at Daniel Jones last night, and it's not pointing fingers at Daniel Jones every week, but there are 2 or 3 plays that you need to make, and the Cowboys made it because of their quarterback last night, and the Giants didn't make them because of their quarterback. And I think that's the issue moving forward. Again, 30,000-foot view of where the Giants are at. They're going to need to upgrade at the position. Can Daniel Jones win games? Yes. Can Daniel Jones all of a sudden make those throws and hit those plays? He hasn't in a very long time in his career at this point for various reasons. The pass protection was very good last night. Now let's take the other aspect of it. The run game was non-existent. Now, as part of that, Dallas has been shredded in their run defense, so all they did was spend time talking about how they were going to improve from a run defensive perspective. Absolutely. There's no doubt that they overcompensated for their run defense. And what they did, Devin Singletary, 14 carries, 24 yards. Overall, the Giants, 24 attempts, 26 yards rushing. You're not going to win many games in the NFL with 26 yards rushing if you don't hit big plays down the field. And that's a huge factor in that game on Thursday night. Now, was it a matter of the Giants being outplayed and dominated? No. And I think that's probably the hardest thing for the Giants to come to grips with, to come to peace with coming out of that game, is the idea that they've clearly closed the gap. The Cowboys are not the same up front on either side of the ball. The Giants were able to neutralize Micah Parsons. He didn't wreck the game. There were plays he wrecked, but he did not wreck the game. And yet, the Giants have now lost for the 7th time to the Cowboys in the rivalry. It's 14 out of 15. They have not beaten Dak Prescott since his rookie year back in 2016, which was 3 head coaches ago for the Giants, Ben McAdoo. It's a rough situation for them to kind of come to grips with. Now, compare the feelings. You left week 1, that stadium, booing Daniel Jones, saying that this season was over, and looking at the possibilities of what was going to happen, who was going to get fired, how this thing was going to get blown up. 3 weeks later, the Giants have won only 1 game. But did that performance last night against the Cowboys show you that they are making progress, that they are a better team? There's no question that a month into the season, the Giants are a better team today than they were last year, and they're a better team where they were when they walked off the field in week 1 at MetLife to the Vikings. Look at the Vikings right now, undefeated, and Sam Darnold's playing out of his mind. And all of a sudden, Kevin O'Connell, the head coach of the year, is one of the favorites for the coach of the year. So, am I saying last night was okay? No. Am I saying that last night is how you want to win games in this league? No. You need to go week to week and figure out what you can do to make sure you put the pressure on your opponent. And I think, big picture, I think Brian Daboll is the coach to get you there. I think he continues to show you that he can gain advantages up front. There are still flaws. They have a tight end room that has yet to be involved. I do think by the end of the year, Theo Johnson is more involved in the passing game. I think Theo has really, shown you some growing pains. He had some drops early on. I think last week in Cleveland when Daniel Jones threw the interception, but had the roughing the passer call, I think that was as much on Theo and how he ran the route versus what Daniel Jones did or didn't do on the throw. But again, lack of running game last night, not taking advantage of the big plays, especially the one to Darius Slayton when you had a free play. Those are the plays you have to cash in. You just have to. You cannot let those plays go. Now, that doesn't mean that Drew Lock or Tommy DeVito would have hit those plays. So don't let that cloud your judgment here. Daniel Jones is still the best option to play quarterback. He's playing a lot better the last 3 weeks than he did in week 1. I wrote in week 1, it was the greatest fear for the Giants to see how Daniel Jones was playing. He's responded, but there's a limit and a ceiling to what Daniel Jones can do. So I can understand. I know there are fans who reach out to me all the time. I follow you. I see you on Twitter talking about it. I know you've already given up on Daniel Jones. You believe Daniel Jones cannot win games this year. I think the Giants will ultimately make a change at quarterback. I think they will look to get someone who has a higher percentage of taking advantage of those big plays downfield, because you can't nickel and dime all game long and expect to win and score points in this league. And 15 points last night is not good enough. You're not going to compete with a team like Dallas that on a given play, it's Dak to CeeDee Lamb and it erases everything. The Giants need erasers in this offense. They need plays that can just say, you know what, we're not running the football, we're grinding, we got to hit a big play. And Neighbors delivers, Wandell delivers, but a lot of that stuff is in the intermediate range. You got to hit those deep ones. You took a couple shots yesterday, you didn't connect. You hit the one to Neighbors early, but that was as much a Neighbors play and a schematic play, like I said earlier, to get Neighbors on a corner that was not going to be able to cover him. Heck, Andrew Booth ended up getting benched at halftime. So, those are the plays that you have to hit. I mean, when Neighbors was open after he hit that double move, if Daniel Jones missed that one, then you start questioning whether or not you need to go to another quarterback. So that's where we're at. Coming out of it, I think now that you reset, obviously Neighbors' health is most important. You need to see how he comes through this concussion protocol, and he has to be healthy for this offense to have any chance to go to Seattle and compete with the Seahawks. Seahawks play on Monday night. I believe they play the Detroit Lions, which is a very good game. So Seattle traveling to Detroit, it's a short week for them too. Long week for the Giants, shorter week for Seattle. So we'll see how they come through it healthy. and then reassess to see where the Giants are at when it comes to that. Let's see. I'm trying to think of my other. I know the other part I wanted to add to this, and I know I got from a lot of you, and I do think it's a valid point. So I asked Brian Daboll after the game. A lot of throwing short of the sticks on third down, and why are they doing it? Is it philosophical? Is it the receivers not getting past the sticks? Because in years past, we always looked at this offense, and not the Daboll offense, but the Giants offense as a whole. Why are the receivers not getting beyond the sticks? You need, 6 yards on third down, and they're running a route, a 5 yards and getting stopped short. It's different with Daboll's offense, especially with the players you're dealing with. With Neighbors and Wan'Dale Robinson, they're yak guys. They're guys that they want to get in space, make a guy miss, and get past the sticks. You saw Wan'Dale do that a lot in the first half last night. Give the Cowboys credit for adjusting. And I think when they were making tackles at the point of the catch, when the point of the catch is that 1.5 yards short of the sticks, it looks bad from an offensive perspective. But again, this isn't a situation where the receivers are unaware of where the sticks are. This is a philosophical situation for this offense with the personnel that they have. There was one play on third down when the Giants were able to motion Neighbors. He came from the left side to the right side of the offense, and they had him matched up on Overshown, again, the linebacker for the Cowboys. That is a money play. You get Neighbors on a linebacker, you're thinking to yourself, get the ball in Neighbors' hands, and he's probably running away from that linebacker, and you have a big explosive play. You got to give Overshown a lot of credit, because in that situation, the throw from Daniel Jones was a little bit behind Neighbors, could have been better. Sometimes those plays are reliant on accuracy from the quarterback, and sometimes that drifts with Daniel Jones. We saw that in week 1, his footwork, and if you're off slightly and you don't hit a guy in stride, it can make a difference in this timing offense, and that's Daboll's offense. And I think, those are the kind of plays, though, when you draw them up, you have to look at it and say, we got to hit that. If you have Neighbors on a linebacker, that is the Giants' money. You need to take that money. You need to score. You need a big play on it. That should go beyond the sticks. That play should be catch, run, past the sticks, at the very least a first down, and maybe even more than that. Think about the years when Odell was part of the Ben McAdoo offense, and even the way things were made. How was that offense in 2016? They were slants. For 4th and 1, when they hit the big, I think it was on a 4th down, it may have been a 3rd down, when they hit the big play against Baltimore in 2016, and Odell took the slant and went to the house. Those slants, when he's catching the ball, he's not beyond the sticks. He's catching the slant, 2-3 yards off the line of scrimmage. It's the idea that, Eli Manning hit Odell in stride. They had the timing down. Everything was perfect. And then Odell hit that extra gear. That's the kind of timing here that Daboll is relying on when they throw in front of the sticks. So I know it's easy to blame the receivers and say, why are the receivers, you need 7 yards, you're running a 6-yard route. Well, they're running a 6-yard route because the idea is to get them in space, and knowing that interior players are not going to be able to tackle Wan'Dale Robinson and Malik Neighbors 1 yard short of the sticks. Now, the Cowboys did that at times in the second half, and I think it really, that's where you kind of want to spin it a little bit and come with something else and try to hit the run game. But the run game last night just was not working. And I don't think necessarily it was a matter of being overpowered up front, which is what the Giants have had in years past against Dallas. It looked different last night. It looked like the Giants could compete, that this wasn't a fluke. Dallas wasn't fumbling the ball all over the place. They weren't turning the ball over everywhere. This was a situation where the Giants were playing them toe-to-toe, and that's the most frustrating part of it, I think, for a lot of the players in the locker room, is that they see the gains that they've made. They know that over the next 12 games, 13 games, they need to become a better team. But you build yourself and dig yourself such a hole that it's hard to climb out of. They're going to have to win one of these games that people don't think they can win. And that's certainly one that they're going to face out in Seattle against old friends Julian Love and Leonard Williams and, of course, Geno Smith, who is playing at a very high level 3 weeks into the season. So that's where we're at. We appreciate you being all in. Thanks to producer Paul Wood. We're going to take a nice little break over the weekend. Hopefully you guys enjoy some football, some family, maybe some apple picking, the fall foliage coming out, whatever you want to do to enjoy your break from the Giants this Sunday. And then we'll be back rolling next week. The Giants return to the facility on Monday. We'll have video calls. Then they will practice on Tuesday. I believe they're going to have Wednesday off, and then back on the practice field Thursday and Friday before traveling to Seattle. I will be traveling to Seattle later in the week, so we will be, again, live from Seattle, and we'll have a normal or a more normal post-game podcast to give you the feel after that game. But we'll get one next week, hopefully, as a preview pod. I'm still working on trying to get some guests. Some things have been falling through, so we haven't been able to. So you just deal with me. Hopefully you guys still enjoy listening to my takes. So for Paul Wood, I'm Art Stapleton. Thanks for being all in, and we will continue to be all in with the New York Giants. 1-3, tough loss to Dallas, but I think they're making strides. Just not enough right now to satisfy the idea that this season is heading in a direction where they can compete for the playoffs. They're going to need one of these games to turn their fate, and we'll be there to see if they can do it. Much appreciated. Thanks for listening. Keep checking out our coverage on NorthJersey.com, and we'll be back next week.